What are some signs you're not as smart as you think? I worked with a guy who held a PhD, and he had a great saying about how little we all know, no matter what our education credentials and experience. He used to say, when you get your bachelor's degree, you think you know everything. When you get your master's, you realize you don't know shit. When you go for your PhD, you realize nobody else does either. I've been in my field for 26 years, and it amazes me every day how little I actually know about my field. I feel that this video is very misleading, starting with the fact that the IQ distribution of the group was not normal, equals not aligned with the bell curve. 5 out of the 6 participants had an IQ that was at least one standard deviation from the norm. That means they were in the upper 7% of all people. Regarding the specific IQs, the girl who talked herself up the most was on the upper side of the normal intelligence, meaning that she is definitely intelligent. An IQ of 112 means that she is in the 79th percentile, equals meaning that 79% of the population have an IQ equal or lower to hers. Another problem is that you just can't infer this kind of correlation from a group of 6 people that is not even representative. See the 5-6, that is just completely anecdotal evidence. You should also take the fact into account that highly intelligent people may struggle with their education system, society, just because this level of intelligence is quite rare and society just isn't made for them, equals underachiever. This may give these people negative feedback regarding their intelligence, leading them to believe that they are actually not that intelligent. So a slightly above average, but still relatively normal, IQ can be an advantage regarding success. Also, other factors such as gender, educational success, correlated with the parent's education, may also affect your subjectively perceived intelligence. And, of course, an IQ is mainly measuring how well you do on the test. Whether it actually reflects what we mean by intelligence, including all its aspects, is another question entirely. Intelligence is made up of hundreds of different components, a lot of them not related to each other. People who feel being advanced in one area make them expert in all areas are not that smart. This response is the closest to how I feel about this question, because I'm inclined to believe that I am indeed intelligent, but I don't brag about it. My education and passion is in computers, and I consider myself a good person to consult for computer advice. However, I still hesitate to call myself an expert out of modesty. There is certainly always someone else who can answer the same questions that I can, and probably be better at it, too. And I am absolutely not an authority on all subjects just because I know my stuff about computers. I will gladly ask other people about topics of their expertise when I don't know something or need help. I would argue that some people are better at synthesizing complex abstract information over others. I would argue that some people have great potential to learn complex abstract things, but this doesn't mean they will. Further, some people struggle with certain abstract concepts, but they are so diligent in their studying that they will end up understanding the same material. I see Joe Rogan as an example of someone who may not naturally pick up abstraction easily, but he takes the time to read, bring in academics, and listen to audiobooks in order to understand complicated topics and things like anthropology and biology. You have no nuanced opinions. You never question your opinions. If someone shares their perspective, you dismiss it outright and refuse to consider its validity. You reject any new information that doesn't confirm your biases. You think IQ matters. You treat others as though they are lesser than you. You believe others can't tell when you are condescending them. I was arguing with a lady online to do with education. She was absolutely insistent that she had read the studies and there was nothing we could say, or evidence that we could supply that would change her mind. I tried pointing out that the people who created those studies would, or should, change their minds if they were presented with the appropriate evidence, That didn't work either. I don't fully agree. Most intelligent people realize they have cognitive skills that are above the norm. There's a big difference in how one projects this knowledge. However, remaining humble is a good sign that one is confident in their mental abilities. Those who shout the loudest usually have something they're insecure about. Talking aloud about being intelligent, however it's measured, is such a social taboo nowadays that most smart people just don't say anything about it even if they happen to know their IQ score. Or, again, however one chooses to define intelligence. It's kind of comical how such an objective measurement can't be talked about. Bragging about having the genes to be 6 feet 6 inches tall, or whatever, is 100% normal. But bragging about having the genes to be 2 standard deviations above the mean, once again, in whatever metric, is somehow completely unacceptable. I half agree with you. I have to disagree on your statement that such an objective measurement can't be talked about. Being smart is absolutely not an objective measurement. Being smart is entirely contextual. If you put me in a room with a bunch of people in my field and asked me to discuss the latest developments, I could do that with confidence. People might point at me or any of the people I am talking to and say they are smart. But if you placed me in a room full of electricians discussing how to properly wire a house and asked me to contribute, you could easily think that I had suffered some form of head injury recently. I understand that some people consider things like how a person acquires new information or how they apply knowledge in abstract ways, or say that there is subtle differences between smart and intelligent, etc. But the reality is that the general public don't. People equate knowing lots of stuff to being smart, so in that way I believe that being smart is contextual. And all this ignores the fact that bragging about anything, whether it's height, intelligence, or money, just makes you look like an asshole, even if it's true. I largely agree with this. Anybody that knows anything understands there are limits and differences to their knowledge, processing patterns, and cognition. It's very contextual. Usually you have some inaccurate representation of reality, and have times where you shine and times when you don't. A common trend I see is that people usually go full on in narrow intelligence and make the assumption that it's representative of everything. It's clearly not. You're a human being. Given the title, it made me think of a book, You Are Not So Smart. It's an easy introduction to aspects of neurology and psychology, specifically the flaws in how we think. Also related to a blog and podcast, though not sure if they're updated anymore. The counter to this is that many people are actually way smarter than they think. We often confuse academic achievement or education with being smart, but there are lots of different aspects to intelligence, and more importantly, what you choose to do with your brain has a bigger impact than having raw intelligence. Being wrong frequently, being unable to achieve your aims, having difficulty learning things. These are the main reasons I've realized I'm not all that smart. Some part of me has the expectation that I'm on the intelligent side of humanity, but my lived experience belies it. Seemingly every time I put forward my best understanding of a thing, every time I predict an outcome, I'm wrong in some way I didn't anticipate. Just wanted to say that those who are the most intelligent, and skilled in applying their knowledge, tend to get to that stage by being wrong a lot. Being wrong or making mistakes doesn't mean you're stupid. You're only stupid if you don't use mistakes for what we have them for. Learning. Every mistake is a chance to learn. Every failure is a chance to grow and get stronger. Not achieving your aims means you either need a better plan to achieve them, or a better defined aim to strive for. Failure is the soil that excellence grows on, but it's up to you to plant the seed kind of thing. Learning to be wrong, to fail, to mistake, and see it as an opportunity to get better rather than a confirmation of your shortcomings is a very good mindset to work on, and it'll serve you in every part of life, from maths to relationships. Bottom line, if you think you're super smart, you're not. You just know a lot about some things. I've been called smart before because I know a lot, compared to friends my age, about science, but going by society's definition of smart, which at this point means knowing a lot about everything somehow, I don't call myself smart. Sure, I know a lot more about biology than most people, but I don't know jack shit about diagnosing and repairing a car, real estate, plumbing, economics, or law. Nobody is an expert on everything and nobody ever will be, except Mr. Peabody. That dude's a genius. It's a catch-22. If you're not smart, you're unlikely to have the abstract capacity to have that self-perception. So, essentially, you'd assume you're smart just because you wouldn't ever think to question it. If you are smart, you probably don't really know either, since the abstraction of subjective intelligence is hard to quantify, especially internally. So, you'd probably have more questions than answers in this case, which in and of itself could show some degree of intelligence and self-awareness. But, how would you really know? But, don't ask me, I'm an idiot. I had a teacher in high school who would intentionally humiliate students, mostly the quiet ones, in front of class. If anyone disagreed with him, he'd try to shut them down by debating them in front of everyone, throwing in personal insults, interrupting them. Basically not a fair debate but straight up trying to make them look stupid and throwing in humor to make it entertaining for other kids. I think most people thought he was smart. He probably thought he was smart. I used to think he was smart, but still a dick. But in hindsight, how smart are you actually if you need to humiliate literal children to feel better about yourself? If he was really smart, why couldn't he do an honest debate? Why even debate kids at all? He was probably insecure as hell that he made his living teaching public school in his shitty hometown and couldn't make it as a philosophy professor or something. If you try to prove you're right by saying things like, "That's the way it's always been done," or "I've been doing it this way for years," or "I learned this years ago, I think I know what I'm talking about." If you haven't educated yourself on something in years and refuse to learn new things, I'm going to assume that you aren't as smart as you think. The way it's always been done isn't always the best way. I think this could apply to some things, but not others. For example, something technology-related would adapt and evolve over time, but the task like getting dressed or pouring a glass of water most likely would not. I mean, sure, but if you think that your level of intelligence is validated by how you get dressed or pour water, then that's probably a sign you're not too smart too, you know? If you think of yourself constantly as being unlucky, we all run into bits of bad luck. Occasionally even stretches of it. But if you are making sensible risk management choices in life, it will absolutely eventually even out. No one flips a coin 50 times in a row and gets tails every time. People who think they are always unlucky are not owning up to the fact that they are making poor choices. If you're unwilling to listen to different perspectives of a subject to understand something, you should try and be open to as many possibilities and ideas as possible. Making decisions with insufficient information isn't very smart. So according to you, a professor of neurochemistry is not as smart as he thinks if he doesn't listen to alternative medicine perspectives from some quack. If people are constantly misunderstanding you, and you constantly have to explain what you really meant, you're not as smart as you think. If every job you've held had things that you knew could be improved, but no one ever listened to your suggestions because they'd been there so long they must have been stuck in their ways, you're not as smart as you think. If you look at a massive, complex problem like, say, global warming, and think you have a simple, easy solution, you're not as smart as you think. See also, racism, poverty, economics, Arab-Israeli relations, etc. 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 Intelligence is often categorized into different subtypes. Emotional intelligence is usually one of those categories, and not having any grasp of empathy could arguably mean that a person is not emotionally intelligent. How can you have any objective self-awareness if you aren't aware of the mental state of those around you? Emotional intelligence is usually one. That's not what most people mean with word intelligence though. If Bob was very socially calibrated, tactful and empathetic but otherwise dumb, most wouldn't say wow, Bob is smart. Emotional intelligence is incredibly important and we should all aim to improve it if possible, but my dog is very good at knowing when I'm sad or when I'm happy. That doesn't make him smart, right? But knowing if you're sad or not is going to make him smarter than other dogs that can't do it. So the idea that emotional intelligence has nothing to do with intelligence per the comment I was responding to is simply incorrect. The idea that math/memory/music is the only measure of intelligence is dumb. That's just the easiest kind of intelligence to measure. Smart people do not live check to check. I disagree. A blanket statement that intelligence is directly reflected in the size of your bank account reeks of bootstrap mentality. People can be stuck in poverty for many different reasons, and being smart is not always enough to ensure financial stability. People can be smart in a myriad of ways, and care more about other factors in life than money. I've met too many wealthy idiots in my life to ever use dollar signs as a measure of intelligence. Yes, they do. There are literally hundreds of millions of people who aren't paid what they're worth, because the system has been engineered to make that happen. I am, somehow, less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. Stephen Jay Gould. Jumping into a conversation with an authoritative and all-knowing tone and then just sort of fading out of the conversation when you realize that the other person knows that you don't know what you're talking about. I have a colleague who started several months ago who does this. Don't get me wrong, he's smart in some areas, but in some subjects he just desperately tries to seem knowledgeable and intelligent but ends up making himself look pretty dumb as a result. There is no shame in not knowing, and the first steps to wisdom is admitting that you know nothing. The most accurate and valid answer: you actually give significance to Reddit karma as if it's an approval rating of correctness, or think because people mass disagree you are therefore wrong, or vice versa. It takes a special brand of idiot to think a zero-entrant criterion on random sample has any reflection of validity to a proposal, claim. Also by definition the exceptional are a minority. When I went to math camp as a teen, the teacher asked if anyone knew pi. I said 3.14. She chuckled politely. The next girl, only 11, knew over 50 numbers after the decimal. Lol. Oh, I just realized that I may not have understood the question. Oh well. Yeah, I've accepted I'm not smart in any way. I just have interest in things and I decide if I want to learn or study it. I don't just look for ways to prove I'm smart cause I know I'm not, and people need to just accept that monkey brain is best sometimes. Yes, I can critically think and sure maybe I do have a high IQ somehow someway, but pretty sure I'm either average or below, but I can think problems through and that's all that matters. Except for math. Fuck math and science. Sorry if you like those, I just never understood math or science, and what I mean by that is I couldn't learn them. I tried but just couldn't. My main course of study is geography, but even then I'm probably not considered very smart at even that, so why people try and be smarter than they are I will never understand. Money brain make life happy. Told the story before, working with an older craftsman and he was cutting open a 55-gallon drum top with a hammer and chisel. I asked him why he didn't use a barrel opener. He asked, "What is that?" I said we had one in our storage and brought it out to him. He tried to use it but put it on incorrectly. I then showed him how to use it. The next day I worked with a different craftsman and told him I didn't think the other craftsman was that sharp. After telling him the story, he asked me who cut the lid off and I told him I did. He said, "Not too smart, is he?"